Technology.
So we will going to continue today our look at the family tree of in the beginning of the Tanakh, and want to first sort of do a little bit of recap, going back to what we did last time, and then we'll move forward a little bit. So as we've got the tree up here, we know that the ones that we really remember and think about starting with, not necessarily, I mean, they certainly had their own lineage as well, Abraham and Sarah, right? So I thought that as we go through it, everybody would chime in on a couple of things that you know about each of these characters. So what's something that you know about Abraham?
Well, that he didn't have children. He was promised that he would have a family.
Great.
As multiple as the stars.
Okay, so there were promises that were made to
Right.
him by God.
Right.
Okay. What else?
He heard God.
Okay, right.
You know, not everybody hears God.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
People think I'm crazy because I feel like I hear him.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you feel like
right.
I hear him.
That's it, right? But not everybody does, right?
Right.
Not everybody's attuned in that same way.
Yeah.
Just like some people feel like they have connections to, people that have passed or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
who's to say that they don't? And maybe there's a certain attunement to that kind of a thing. And there's, people might have the same type of thing with animals
Right.
or whatever, right? There's there's different kinds of expression and hearing and whatnot. Okay, great. So
And God told him to leave this place and go forward, and he did.
he picks up and he goes on a journey,
Yeah.
right? And he's
Not knowing
right,
where,
right.
but having faith.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent,
And he was welcoming to strangers.
nice. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Welcoming strangers. These are things. There's a section within this little thing where I can put in biographical information. That would be an interesting thing to add.
He got famous.
Right, about
And
him.
he beat 9 kings.
Right. There's that relationship that goes on with him and in the interaction with the kings, right? And we don't have it right in this view, but right with his nephew Lot,
Right.
right, and the interactions with him,
Right.
both in Canaan with the kings, and then also in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right.
All right. Great. All right.
He actually argued with God. Nobody.
Nice,
Just,
nice. Okay, he takes that time
Right.
with the story of Sodom to
yeah.
argue on some level,
Right.
to at least
Intercession.
express an
Yes, right.
idea,
I was gonna
right?
say,
Yeah.
right.
And stands up
I'll
for
argue on behalf of someone
on
else.
behalf of others.
Other people.
That's
Yeah.
great, right?
Yeah.
Defender.
Rabbi Artson posted a Devar Torah this week about Isaac, who prays on behalf of Rebecca,
Right.
right? And that ability. So that's nice because we see it in both generations, right? With Abraham on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Isaac on behalf of Rebecca, of empathy and concern for somebody else, right?
Right.
Breaking that it's one thing to be in prayer and asking for, or thinking about your own service, right? But it's a whole nother level to be doing that on somebody else's behalf, right? So that's nice. So both Abraham and Isaac are similar in that way.
Our Siddurim says that compassion is power.
Nice.
And so when we have compassion, there's a power that's released in that.
Good.
I believe that.
Good.
When
Good.
I read that in there, I was
Mhm.
like, wow, that's really.
And when we think about there's a Kabbalistic understanding that each of the ancestors had a different aspect of the divine that they were most connected to, and Abraham is chesed, right? Is kindness, right? And you could translate that into compassion, right? Kindness and compassion, very similar, and so that was Abraham's strength was his kindness and compassion. Nice.
He's like a defender when he rescued Lot with 300 of, what were they, servants and shepherd kids,
But that in
And-
Sodom,
when he went against the 9 kings
Oh,
to slaughter the
uh-huh,
9 kings
right.
because they had taken Lot.
right? Right.
And he didn't have an army. These guys ruled that area for, it said, many years. So 9 kings ruled that area for many years, and he went in there and,
Did he defeat all 9 of them, or there was this battle between 5 and 4 together?
And then he went in and kind of dominated what was left.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Then that's what got him famous, because because they saw how he was outnumbered and weaponed, and
Right.
it will give you notoriety.
I guess I'm in awe of his persuasive powers, and we have to believe that this was the intercession of God in that issue.
Right.
Because I wonder where I could sign up for some of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's we do see that in a number of cases, right? That he's got to have this power, and sometimes we're reading into these stories, which is fine, right? The rabbis have done that all along, so we're in good company. To see what are examples of that. We can say, well, when they left Haran to go to Canaan, it says Abraham, Avram and Sarai at that time, right? Avram and Sarai, and the souls that they had made in Haran. And so that's a strange phrase. What does it mean, the souls that they had made in Haran? But the rabbinic understanding of it is others who had, that they had persuaded, basically, that this was the true path, right? That following God, that one God, there must have been some sort of persuasion, right, around that. So we see it right there. We see it with him, and that's certainly the conversation between him and God, right? That he's got to be somewhat persuasive to have God agree. Oh yeah, I'm not going to destroy the earth, right? Or not destroy the city if there's righteous people there. Even the conversations with Lot. You go one way, I'll go another way, right? And we'll be at peace. Probably, it's not in the text, but you can imagine some persuasion needing with Isaac, right? I'm going to take you and bind you on an altar, tie you up and raise a knife, and there had to be something. And of course, the rabbis do look at Isaac and give an expression of his faith, right? That he went along with this and all. But I think that word persuasion can be seen in a lot of different of the stories.
Well, there's also some question about Isaac and Isaac's own abilities, intellectual abilities, because I've been in classes where it's questioning whether he had full intellectual powers, that he might have been what would today see as someone who was special needs.
Right. It's an interesting question, right? We're going to jump ahead now to the next generation, right? But maybe we'll still return for some conversation about Sarah. But Isaac, there's not a lot there about him, right? He's sort of this in between. I always think of like the second of a sequel of a trilogy or whatever. A lot of times it's just sort of this bridge between 1 and 3, and so in many ways he's just this bridge between Abraham and Jacob, who then has really the big family and all. But yes, so there is this. I don't know if the rabbis pick up on it so much, but I have heard in more modern days that question of like maybe he had some limited capacities, right, intellectual.
But was it that, or was it he loved his father and he had faith that his father was going to be doing the right thing?
It's just a different way of looking at it, right? and especially as different peoples are looking to see themselves in the text, right? So I think it can make sense to say, oh, like, do we see somebody in this text?
Right.
Like, just as we might say, oh, well, Moses had a speech impediment. Right? Well, there's midrashim as to why that is, right? Picking up the coal and it burned his tongue, whatever else, right? But if somebody who has their own disability can see themselves in the text in some way, I think that makes it richer for all of us, right? So there's nothing that proves it, and we could certainly come up with other explanations, but it is a nice way to open up a broader view of the story. Good. What about Sarah? Let's go back to Sarah for a minute. What do we know there?
Beauty.
Okay, right. We're told that she's beautiful.
And she was barren.
She was, right? And we find that with a number of our matriarchs along the way. We'll see that.
She also became jealous.
Yeah.
Right. There's a jealousy streak. But also, and similar to, again, we see different things that recur, similar to Rebecca, right, who gets told directly, a prophecy from God, that the younger is going to serve the older, right? So Sarah has a bit of this prophecy as well to say, Abraham, you've got to send away Ishmael. Isaac's the one, right? Isaac's going to be the heir. Isaac's going to inherit. We've got to make sure that happens.
But she started from a good place to give her husband a child, and realized then that she was being looked down upon by her handmaiden because she couldn't. And then seeing the two boys together, realized, there was this conflict. And
She's provoked. She wasn't just jealous. That woman provoked her. I think she was younger, and she had her heirs, and I just think she was provoked. And I think Ishmael was not that great. And I think they had to be pretty bad for them to get sent out without provisions. Because Abraham was passionate,
kind and compassionate,
and so for him to say, just get out, they had to do some stuff.
Yeah, he wanted to make his wife happy,
Well, but
I mean, go ahead,
I
Judy.
think she became jealous of
Hagar, or Ishmael.
Ishmael's mother.
Yeah, Hagar.
I can't remember her.
Hagar.
I think she became jealous, and I think she also began to sense that Ishmael was real competition for Isaac in terms of inheritance.
Right.
And she wanted her son to.
Right. So whether it was intentional on the part of Hagar and Ishmael, or whether it was just implicit in the situation that Sarah found herself in, right? That
she started from a good place,
right?
And then
that there's this other woman, right? And this other woman easily has a child, and gets pregnant, and then the child, right, can be seen as the heir, and we know it's supposed to go through a different one. So it's all at least implied in there, but also, as Linda's saying, maybe more even provocational too.
Well, also, I think, there's the thing of believing in the one true God. And we see that she did not necessarily, and neither did the son. That's where the moon god worship came, and that's where Islam came from, is the moon god worship. So it's the same with Esau. In other words, if you're not going to serve the living God, you can't have the birthright, because the birthright is understanding that God is who he says he is, and we serve him. We're the chosen people that he picked. I heard him. We're doing it.
Right.
And so if they didn't have that, they almost, you can't be the one that carries the birthright if you don't believe in it.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
it's wanting to continue the tradition, and this is something that we still certainly struggle with till today, right? Wanting to carry on the tradition by passing it along to to people who are going to continue that. Right? We talk a lot about continuity.
For me,
but,
it's powerful because
right,
I just,
right, you came into it, right? You came
so
into it.
if you're not
right?
gonna,
Right.
she knows, if you're not gonna, well then go.
Right.
Get out. You're
Right,
not
and
gonna,
that's a struggle, right? And that's a struggle because there's the tension between it's naturally yours, right, versus you have to work for it, right, and you have to believe, and there isn't a clear understanding in Judaism as to which one it's necessarily going to be, right? So, is there a difference between somebody who is born Jewish, right, born to two Jewish parents, but never does anything religious, never does anything spiritual, doesn't observe any of the holidays, and doesn't necessarily even believe, right, or at least struggles with that? Is there a difference between that person and somebody who's not Jewish, but is within a Jewish household, right? Maybe somebody's married somebody who's Jewish, and they observe the holidays with their partner, and they pass it along to their children, but maybe they haven't gone through the step of formal conversion. So, which one's better, right? Mm-hmm. Which one's following the true path? It's a hard. Judaism doesn't come down really strongly on that. And so I think that's part of the struggle that we find ourselves in today, when we see such high levels of intermarriage. And so for a long time it was shunned, right? Pushed aside. If we don't allow it, it won't happen, right? If we don't celebrate it, there was just a stream on one of the rabbinic Facebook pages that I'm on, asking about, do your congregations or do you send out Mazel Tov cards on anniversaries of people that are intermarried, right? And some congregants said, can't do it, right? Shouldn't be condoning that, right? And other people saying, no, we want to bring these people in, and it's not about conversion, right? But we want them to feel comfortable and part of our community, and that means both the Jewish and the non-Jewish partner, right? So it's a real struggle that we're still facing, and it's not an easy one or the other. Right?
Years ago, a friend of mine who was Catholic, I think it was a cousin or someone, who was getting married, and it was not going to be in the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. I think she or he was marrying outside, and my friend had to go to their parish priest and to get permission. Right. And he did not give permission. He said, your being there condones the marriage. Right. I don't know that we feel that way as much anymore.
It's definitely changing, right?
I mean, certainly maybe among the very Orthodox, but generally you want to see just a happy couple and supporting them in whichever way they're going.
There was the rabbinical assembly decided numbers of years ago now that conservative rabbis are not allowed to perform intermarriages, but it also said that there are 4 no-nos for conservative rabbis, and if you do them, in theory, at least, you can be kicked out of the rabbinical assembly. One is performing an intermarriage. Another one is performing a wedding where somebody who had been married before hadn't gotten a get, right, and didn't get a religious divorce. One is recognizing patrilineal descent instead of just matrilineal descent, right? That if there were a family where the father was Jewish and the mother wasn't Jewish, considering those children Jewish, right? And the fourth is that going against matrilineal descent, right? So the mother is what determines the birth. I mean the religion. And so if you've got a family and the mother's not Jewish, but you bring the kids into your school and they have a bar mitzvah and right? You're really setting them up as Jews, right? Even though they're technically not.
Right, they'll get to Israel and they won't be considered Jews.
Right. And the fourth one is around conversion, is that conversion has to entail hatafat brit, or circumcision for a man, and mikvah for men and women, right? Immersion at the end of it. So those are the biggies. But along with intermarriage was that you weren't allowed to perform or attend in intermarriage, right? And then along the way, so you get a lot of people who, relatives were getting married, close friends were getting married, and they didn't go because they thought they were going to get kicked out of the rabbinical assembly. And then recently, in the last 5 years or so, it's really come out that no one was ever, people would go, and no one was ever, kicked out for that. Right. So they've really sort of, I don't know if formally changed it, but at least, implicitly, that it's about performing in intermarriage and not about attending an intermarriage. So, but there was that concern that you attend, you're condoning it, you're giving it some, right? And then if you attend, well, what happens? And I know that I had this conversation with Rabbi Artson, and he said, he'll go, not to everyone, but if it's meaningful and it's important to him, he'll go. But he wants, his reading of it is that he never goes as a rabbi. Right? So don't ask me to speak, right? Don't ask me to make hamotzi, right? Blessing over the bread, right? I'm just there as a guest, right? And to celebrate with you. Right. So I'm not Rabbi Artson, I'm Brad Artson, right? And so that idea, giving it a little bit of a change. Now, everybody who's there sees him and knows he's a rabbi, right? So it's still a little bit of difficulty, but it is a way that he's looked at it as saying, oh rabbis aren't allowed to attend, but in this instance, I'm not there as a rabbi, right? But there is this concern about condoning.
What is it in Numbers or Leviticus that God tells them if I will kill your children if they go with them? And all
I mean, there's some different things, but I don't even know. I'd have to go back and look at it a little bit more. But I don't even know that it's really traced back biblically. It's rabbinic more. I mean, I'm sure there's some biblical sources that help to prove it, but there's a lot of rabbinics around
I think it's in Numbers right after Balak convinces.
It's just a lot more about implication that in marriage is the best way to go, right? So
Balaam to trick them basically into, once they come out of covenant,
right?
His protection isn't there. If you step out of covenant, you're outside the hoopah basically, and you're so that's when they all had the plague and everything else.
Right, and you get into Pinchas.
And then right after that, I think he gives that decree, God. And Moses said, God said, and that holds a lot of weight.
Right.
My ex-husband is dealing with this now because his younger son, my son's half-brother, is getting married in May, and she's Jewish through her father and not through her mother.
Right.
And Jack is religious. He goes to Chabad. He lays tefillin every day.
Right.
He's having a real problem.
Sure.
And they certainly will raise the children Jewishly, but my son said, my father's getting a little crazy about this.
It's hard. Absolutely. Okay, so Sarah, we've talked a bit about her, that she is devoted, that she is, what were some of the other terms we used for her? Something else that we said.
She was jealous.
She was protective of her son and his inheritance. It
almost sounds like the intrigues of the courts, where the queen wants to make sure that her son becomes king and not,
But it's not just about king though. It's about wanting to pass along the heritage, right, to the next. Good. Okay, so then we get to the next generation of Isaac and Rebekah. What do we know about them? Not just both in terms of story and in terms of essence. Right?
Well, Rebecca obviously had kindness.
Okay.
She saw a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
She gave him water.
Good.
She thought she had compassion for the animals to take care of it.
Nice.
She was willing to go, that this might be the right person for her.
Right.
So she was willing to leave her family.
So there's a lot of faith there. Good.
Right.
Isaac was so obedient, he let someone else choose his wife.
Right.
And just trusted that God was going to be in it.
Mm-hmm. He let somebody else choose his wife. He let somebody else, lift a knife over his head.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, very obedient.
Right.
This is where a lot of questions come from. Because any of us who have raised children.
They're obedient all
I mean,
the time.
I have good kids, but
Right,
come on, they would have
right.
asked me. What the heck are you doing, Mom?
Yeah, but there's also, that wasn't questioned by anyone. Or very, very rarely was that questioned in traditional societies.
Right.
Right.
It was always a chosen marriage.
Yeah. But
I'm
your
not
parents
I'm
were
not talking about choosing the
main
wife for you, of course. I
Right.
mean, my grandparents were arranged
Right.
marriages. I'm talking about the raising the knife.
Oh, yes,
You know.
yes. Right.
And not streaking. What are you
Right.
doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think that looking back at Sarah too, there's a humanity in there. I think that and I have not heard a situation where, well, it probably does exist, but contemporarily we say, that might have been what she was doing, but that was not the model we want to have for how we treat others. But a mother can understand that.
Right.
Our it's in our kishkas.
Well, going along with that, in last week or the week before's New Friday selection that comes from Florida region,
Okay.
Kathy Swerdlow, who's the president, talked about why did Lot's wife turn around, and was she disobeying or was she a mother who heard the cries of anguish and had to turn around to see what was happening?
We can imagine that.
And that's what.
Sure.
Lots of questions.
And of course, she had no name. It's
No,
amazing.
right. A lot of them.
Yeah.
Certainly, a lot of the female
Yeah.
characters are
Yeah.
like that. They're just known as their connection to
To
somebody
the
else.
male, yeah.
Great. Okay, so that's Isaac and Rebekah, and we then go down in the tree. Oops, let's see if I can do this. Come on. Oh, there we go. Right. Once we hit Isaac, then they have Jacob and Esau, and what do we know there? Let's stay just with them.
This may not be the direction you're thinking of going because we didn't add anybody under Esau. But,
Right.
I read ahead in the portion and read the whole portion in English. And Esau was troubled that his two wives were not a blessing to his parents, to his mother particularly.
Yep.
And he went out and married a third woman, so he could be marrying someone that
they approved.
And that was approved.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting. I had never done that.
Right. So then the question is, does he marry even the first two? Does he marry them, as against his parents? Like, okay, you're not gonna love me like you love Jacob, and you're not gonna give me the blessing, and right? So I'm going to go against what you do, right? And we know that happens with children as well. Like, you're doing something I don't like, I'm going to do something you're not going to like. I haven't yet. I mean, when I get time, I'll put Esau's family in there. And part of why I haven't done it yet is I don't think, and I have to go back and really read through it again, but looking through it briefly, I don't think that there's any place where they overlap, right? Right, where you like in other places where we go back to Lavan, right? Mm-hmm. So right, we go back to them, and our lineage from Abraham are going back and marrying them, right? But I don't think there's places where that we have. Now later on in the stories, you'll find interactions with other peoples, but I still don't think that there's any marriages that go back into Esau's family, or Ishmael's family.
But there are interactions with Isaac and Ishmael.
There are interactions between them.
Funeral,
yes.
And then there was something later.
Right. Yes. No. They come back together again for certainly for Isaac's funeral.
For Abraham's funeral.
Oh, you're talking about Isaac and Ishmael.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isaac and Ishmael come back together for Abraham's funeral. Right. Right.
But they don't have any family line interactions.
Right.
No,
right.
That's correct.
Right.
But this was the first time that I read on about Esau,
Mm-hmm.
and
right.
shows my education.
This is why we're doing it.
That's right.
That's why I'm focusing so much time on this. Is like I've seen some things before where it like asks questions like, what do you know about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? And what do you know about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington? And people score a lot better on that than they score on our ancestors here, and so that's why I'm focusing on this a lot, right?
Esau was the provider of game for the family. I mean, he was the one
Yeah.
out hunting all the time.
Nice.
And so, Jacob liked that because,
Yeah.
we didn't all have to go out and hunt today because Esau brought in game for the week, and
Right.
that
We
was
don't get it's interesting. The text doesn't tell us that Jacob and his parents, right, are dependent upon Esau for food, right?
No, but it said he liked him because he brought it in.
Isaac likes Esau because of that, right? So certainly we assume, okay, yes, that means that Isaac. Well, I don't know if it means that Isaac is eating it and that Isaac is enjoying that, or does he like Esau because of his strength, right? It's going back to seeing what are some of the deficiencies maybe of Isaac, that he would never see himself as a hunter, right? As a strong person. And so it's not necessarily that he's bringing food for him to eat, although he likes to, but maybe he likes to eat it because of what it means about his son, right? And parents who like, oh, my son who can be the doctor, or my son who can, right? Who can
as if that's a reflection of us,
right?
And it
is somewhat, right? But yes. So we do have that relationship there. Jacob seems to be getting along just fine, making stew at home without the meat from Esau.
But, because they have herds of domesticated
Corrected. They have
animals,
domesticated animals, right?
That are there.
Right.
And there was also something that I read in the last couple of weeks about Isaac, saying that Isaac saw what his parents did to Ishmael,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore, as a father, he did not want to see
Mm-hmm.
that there was a child who was ignored.
Okay. Nice.
That was just something.
And that's Isaac in his that's Isaac in his relationship to Esau, that he doesn't want, even though we know certainly from the prophecy that Jacob's going to be the chosen, if you will, right? Isaac, I like that. That's really nice, right? But the opposite side of that is saying what he didn't learn is, and Jacob certainly doesn't learn it either, is that there shouldn't be favoritism, right? Mm-hmm. It's one thing for Isaac to have treated them equally, right? But clearly the text is saying he preferred Esau, right? So it's not just I want them to be equal. Right. It's doing it in the opposite direction. Right.
But he only had one wife, Isaac.
He only had one wife, right? That's just the one of them,
good.
right? We will applaud him for a monogamous relationship.
And he doesn't have very good discernment about the birthright. And I'm not sure if Rebecca never told him what God said to her or what, but he seems to be having to get tricked, lied to, and swindled.
Yeah.
So that he'll put the blessing on the right kid.
Well, but it's an interesting question. So you've used two different terms, and I think that in some ways they were interconnected, in some ways they're separate. There's the birthright, and there's the blessing. Mm-hmm. What does the birthright mean?
I believe carrying on the religion of Yod He Vav He,
okay.
Basically.
So I think in a traditional sense of it, the birthright was about inheritance. Right. It was about financial, right? That
as the oldest
son, that when the father dies, right, all the property, if there's two sons, Jacob and Esau, all the property would get divided into three, and the oldest would get a double portion, right? If there were 4 sons, it would get divided into 5, and the oldest would get a double portion, 2/5, right? Where the other ones would get 1/5. That's the birthright, right? And when it says inside, right, when Jacob is saying to Esau, "Sell me your birthright," right? And Esau says, "Well, what is it? What good is it to me? I'm at the point of death, right? It's a financial thing, right? I don't need things in the future, because if I don't get food now, I won't live to see those things. So it doesn't really matter, right? So in some ways, the birthright is financial. The blessing is a bit more on the spiritual side of them. Now, it could be that there's a linking and an overlap, but in some ways, the story could have played out where Esau sells the birthright, and maybe that's something that happens in other places and things like that as well. We don't have it in the text, but we can imagine, right, another situation in a family where the oldest says, I need something else. I'll sell you my field. I'll sell you this. I'll sell you my birthright, right? The future, you'll get this money in the future for what I need now. So he could have sold that without giving up the blessing later on. And that's why, I think that's probably why they need to trick Isaac into giving the blessing to Jacob. You certainly can read it as he was left out of the loop, right? He wasn't told that they had made this agreement, that Jacob was going to get the birthright. But on another way, you could see it as, okay, maybe he was told, but he was still planning on giving the blessing to Esau. Right? Possibly two separate things, but also possibly united. So there's
it was a prophecy from God, like you said. So
right.
It seems like she should have shared it.
Right. Yes. So one, she should have shared it, right? And you'd hope that in a wonderful marriage that they communicate, right? Mm-hmm. But two, again, like, does that prophecy from God that in the future, right, the oldest is going to serve the younger, does that mean that the oldest doesn't deserve a blessing, right? They're not necessarily connected. But yet, Rebecca certainly saw that and said, we want you to, every leg up you can get, we're going to give it to you, right? So you're going to get that blessing to, because they saw that as important and as a support for the future, right? Good. Okay. So there we have Jacob and Esau. Like we say, we can fill out Esau's family tree on the other side. But right now, let's swing over here. What do we know of I can make it a little smaller. Let's see, where is that? There we go. Okay, so we're gonna lose, shoot. Now we can't see their names. There we go, we got them all on there. Okay, so we've got Leah and Rachel, and then Bilhah and Zilpah, who are their handmaidens. What do we know? Let's start specifically with, where do you want to start? With Leah's the oldest, so we'll go with her. What do we know about Leah?
I don't like Leah because she was involved in the trick to swindle Jacob out of the true one that he thought he was working for.
Okay.
And so she was compliant in a swindle.
Okay.
And I don't like swindlers.
Right, right.
So that bothers me.
Okay,
But as far as the fact that she was very fertile and she had many children that are part of this wonderful religion we have.
Right.
But that whole, she knew what she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't tricked. She
Right.
knew.
Right. The rabbis in the Midrash, there's one Midrash that says that Jacob and Rachel had come up with some signs that Rachel would do to show him that it was her, and that she gave those signs to Leah.
Oh.
That she was in on it too, right? That she helped Leah to go through with this, to get married to Jacob.
Well, my mother got married before her older sister, and her future mother-in-law said to her, "You need to apologize to her
Hey, you
for
mentioned
doing
that,
that."
right?
And that's even in, this
Century.
the last century. So I think that it probably was seen as the right thing to do.
Right. I'm just trying to see if I can.
It doesn't say in the.
It doesn't say it in the
scriptures
text.
that-
It doesn't say it in the
that
text.
Rachel was in on it.
No.
But it's clear that Leah had to be. Leah had to be.
I hear what you're
involved.
saying. Absolutely.
So to make Rachel part of that, I don't know. I mean, she could have warned him. But, we don't know if Laban was heavy-handed with his daughters. We don't know that either.
Right.
They could have been fearful, and
That's
then,
true.
we do what he says or else,
Yeah,
he's gonna come down on us, so.
Just want to see if I can
And
find it
without the
here.
protection of your husband or your father, you had nothing.
You have nothing. And you become part of the oldest profession.
Yes.
One of the it's not here in this one. Oh, there's only one midrash listed on this verse. Be interesting to see where it is, but with Leah, it says in the text that her eyes were dimmed. And one of the explanations for that is that she grew up knowing that in Canaan, right, is this other part of their family, right, Jacob and Esau, and she knew she was the oldest, and she knew Esau was the oldest, and she spent years and years sort of mourning over the fact that she was going to have to marry Esau, right? And she was crying and crying and crying, for years, and that affected her appearance, right? With that idea of the oldest marrying the oldest, right? And so that's one of the explanations the rabbis give for why she had a lesser of appearance.
But she hadn't met him. What was she crying about?
Well, she knew about this. Word gets back and forth, right? And you've got this guy Esau, who's not the best guy. At least how the rabbis portray him, right? He's not a great guy, and she's going to get stuck with marrying him, and it was not what she wanted, right?
The Yankees were talking.
Yeah, everybody was
Like a
talking,
mountain man,
right?
basically,
Right.
He was
Right.
rough.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Leah. What do we know about Rachel?
She's very beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay.
And that she also did not easily conceive.
Right. She's also, we're told, barren at the beginning, right? And we end up with, she makes the first move. Leah has 4 children, right? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Has the 4 of them, and at which point, one of the explanations, interesting. One of the explanations. So the first 3, if we look in the text, Leah gives them names based on, now my husband will love me, and now I'll be seen in his, like Reuven comes from the word re'eh, to see, right? Then now I'll be seen in a positive light. Shimon comes from shema, to hear.
Yeah, right.
Now God will hear my voice and hear my cries. Levi, what Levi is. I could look it up, but so the 3 of them have that kind of connotation. When she gets to Yehuda, comes from the idea of thankfulness, right? And a thanks to God. And the reason why this text we looked at yesterday says that she did the math, right? She knew that Jacob was going to have 12 sons, and if 12 sons, there's 4 mothers. That she would have 3 of those 12, right? So she already had her 3.
Right.
The 4th one is
A
bonus at that point, right? So she names, and then she's thankful, right? Because now she's got more than she deserved.
Right.
I have a question
So-
about this, the order.
Yep.
When did he start to go to the maids?
After Yehuda, after the 4th.
And
So that's what I was going to
hadn't
say.
had any?
Rachel hadn't had any, right? So it goes Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, then Bilhah. Then Bilhah has Dan and Naphtali,
Okay.
right? And then Leah says, okay, 2 can play at that game, right? I'll give you Zilpah, and he has Gad and Asher, right? And then back with Leah again, Issachar and Zebulun, right? And only after all of that does Joseph come on the scene, right?
Okay.
Joseph's the last.
That had to be really, really hard.
Really hard on Rachel. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean,
Really
I
hard.
know me, I
Right.
probably have taken a couple of them out.
No, it's really,
I mean,
really
seriously,
hard.
if
Right.
I was really in
Right.
love with it, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I
Right.
know me,
Right.
especially back then, I mean, who knows? I mean.
It's one of the things that that's also we talk about, we talked before about finding yourselves in the text, right? People who have infertility issues today are finding support through some of this, right? That this is not new, and there's an organization called Hasidah that works with infertility with Jewish couples, Jewish women specifically. But no, it's really difficult when you see other people, right? And
Well, just that he's going to them,
right, well, right,
just to have kids.
right.
I
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Where's the love at?
Absolutely.
For me, that's
Right, and we don't know that it is to the absence of a loving relationship between him and Rachel, right? That may have continued, right, through the whole time. But it just didn't end up bearing any children, right? He still clearly loved Rachel the most, right? There's no doubt. That's the whole thing with Joseph, right? And why he favors Joseph, because she's his favorite wife. And it's not in the text, right? But we'd have to think that her not being able to conceive, not being able to have children, pained him as well, right? We don't see it, right? But we could read that into it too.
Sure, that's why when he got one from her, he was like gold.
Right.
And also seeing that she hasn't been able to conceive, and seeing her sister have one after the other had to be painful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then she has to feel that the problem has to be within her.
Yeah. Right. Which is which even in the right.
She has to feel that way. It may not be true, but she had to have felt that way.
Right. Yeah.
In the same token, she kept her shape.
Yeah.
And was still more beautiful than everybody else anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He probably had her on his arm all the time.
Yeah.
And
the others were baby makers.
Yeah. I mean, it's so bizarre, really.
Yeah. Right.
It's like a big family feud after a while. I mean,
certainly. Certainly. Okay. Great. So, trying to think of other things about Rachel and Leah before we move on.
And when we say the Amida, we don't talk about Bilhah and whatever the other.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Some people do.
Oh, really?
Some people do. I have to check the Reconstructionist Siddur. They may have Bilhah and Zilpah in it. But certainly, or renewal, some of the renewal Siddurim, they may have Bilhah and Zilpah. I know that there's some people that do. I'll look that up. And then the Reform liturgy has the language of Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel, oldest to youngest, right? And order of marriage, right? Leah first, then Rachel. We have in the conservative liturgy Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. That comes mostly because as conservative Jews, we look to older sources to influence what we're doing, right? And most of the older sources had it in that order. And so, I think even if not in the Torah, in the Bible someplace, has it in that order. And so that's what that's where we follow it. Leaving the other two out, yeah. I mean, just like we don't mention Hagar. Well, I mean, we don't mention Hagar because we don't follow anybody from her. But still, they weren't there. They were baby makers, right? That's what they were there for, and they're not.
She wasn't even from Chaldea. She wasn't even Chaldean, right?
Who's that? Bill Hunzel.
Hagar.
No, Hagar.
Egyptian, right? I forget.
I don't remember.
But she wasn't.
I don't remember Hagar.
The same as Abraham.
I don't remember if we have any kind of her lineage where she was from.
Because she wouldn't be a slave. She was a slave, right?
Well, question is to what were handmaidens? Right. What status did they really have? I'm not sure.
Were they ladies in waiting?
Right.
Like for the queen?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of questions, more than answers.
It's a lot of questions. Well, that's why we have all the rabbinic texts.
Yeah.
Right, to answer a lot of those questions, right, to give us some answers to those questions, and why we relish in coming up with many of our own answers, right, as well.
To question and to try to
keep picking at it, and that's what I will suggest. We'll wrap up early. I've got the next phases of the family tree going into Egypt. But we'll pick that up next time, especially with more people here. But I'll try and reiterate this other times as well. But I would, one of the things that I would suggest is, read the Parsha each week, right? If you don't have a Tanakh, I can help you get one. And it's, just asking the questions, right?
Yeah.
Not even and you can come up with some of your own answers. You certainly can Google, you can ask me, whatever it is, right? But that exercise of reading the Parsha, seeing what doesn't quite make sense, what are some things that you've never thought of before, all of that is one way to continue to deepen your connection to the tradition.
I think the only time we're encouraged to read and to pull it apart.
Yeah.
Not just to read
Right.
it and accept it as it's given.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, when I
That's what I
it's
love
basically
about these
it's
groups.
basically the place that I started with people. I mean, partly because this is the mentor I was working with did this. When we were going into the LA County jails, and we would work with inmates, we would just say to them, read this story and come with a list of questions next week.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the starting place.
Right.
And they'd come in with a sheet of paper, questions, and that's what we would talk about. So it's really a great exercise to do, and especially if you can keep it up each week. You certainly get into some sections that are, you just roll your eyes at it and it's boring and whatever else. But for right now, we're in the meat of it, right? We're in the meat of the story.
When you went to the jails, were you just there for Jewish men?
In theory, but we would sometimes meet with some that weren't Jewish or some that were not technically Jewish. They were saying that they were Jewish because they wanted to get better food or whatever else.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly to just be with the Jewish inmates. Very good. Thank you.